So I've got this theory that Big Finish's Dark Eye series was initially conceived as a lead into the BBC inevitably granting them the rights to new series IP, and specifically the Time War, by conceiving an escalation of tensions between the Time Lords and the Daleks. I was proven correct in this by the company then announcing their first wave of New Who releases immediately following the conclusion of Dark Eyes, where they've kind of gone a bit box set mental and I'm now totally behind on their output because you'd have to be pretty fucking rich to be able to afford everything that Big Finish puts out these days. I know they're trying to encourage people to buy multiple box sets and follow multiple series by doing more crossovers and having, say, the 8th Doctor showing up in the Diary of River song and River showing up in Doom Coalition 2, but given just the sheer amount of box sets they've been putting out lately, I can't imagine that many people being in a lucrative enough position to be able to afford all of it. As much as I love them to bits and will always support the company, financially and vocally, I have started to get the feeling with Big Finish of late that they're trying to do too many things too quickly with too few writers on staff to cover as many bases of things that people watch Doctor Who for as possible. Most of the time there only appears to be a handful of regulars spreading themselves too thinly across a wide number of ranges, and some recent releases have started to feel a bit hurried. However, fortunately that's not so much the case with the first Doom Coalition box set, which I thought was pretty decent on the whole. It consists of 4 stories that do each have their own identity, and while they're not all great, they each have more of a definition to them than the stories in Dark Eyes 3 and 4, which both got a bit too obsessed with crafting its own universe, so they didn't really have that much time to do anything all that innovative. The story arc in Doom Coalition isn't as central to the whole thing, which meant that the individual stories had more of a chance to impress me with their ideas. The box set opens with the 11, which I was expecting to be in 2 minds about, as I usually am when it comes to stories set on Gallifrey. Whenever they do Time Lord related things, I prefer it when they delve into the murky depths of Gallifreyan lore and history, and I usually tune out when it gets a bit too bogged down in political shit. And the 11 is well and truly political shit, but it's also got some interesting ideas to play with as well that offsets the aforementioned political shit. We've got this insane Time Lord called the 11, who has all 11 of his incarnations coexisting inside his head, you know, hence the name, most of them insane and homicidal. He's been a prisoner on Gallifrey for years, but when a student comes to interview him for her academy project, in some scenes that either set you in mind of Magneto in X-Men 2 or Clarice and Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs, depending on what type of nerd you are, the 11 then breaks out and causes a prison riot and a constitutional crisis on Gallifrey because of a really stupid loophole. It's a highly engaging and action-heavy story that deals enough interesting plot twists and some intense scenes of the 11 being an incredibly fun and devious lunatic to keep a nice balance between that and the ins and outs of Gallifreyan society and politics. While a lot of its dialogue is a mesh between technobabble and political jargon, I was never sat there thinking, yada yada yada, when's the actual stuff gonna start happening again? So, you know, props to it for that. Anyway, we then move on into The Red Lady, which is just one of the most breathtaking bits of modern Big Finish that I've heard so far. So the Doctor and Liv show up in London in 1963, because that is the only year ever where the collection belonging to a recently deceased art collector was donated to the British Museum against his wishes. He wanted them locked away and unseen forever for reasons unknown, and the museum workers find a bizarre recurring motif across all of the pieces of art that span multiple centuries and continents and even formats that all feature this mysterious red lady stood in the distance wearing a weird mask who has the bizarre ability to get closer to the viewer every time they look at her. Now, obviously the horrible cynic inside of me was shouting, isn't this basically just the Weeping Angels? You look away, you look back and she's moved. And you may be thinking that as I describe it to you, but when you're actually listening to it, the sound design and script mesh together so well to make it totally spine-chilling. And it's a new addition to my list of must-listen Big Finish Doctor Who. One of the main reasons the Red Lady works so well, and this needs underlining 80 billion fucking times here, there is no explanation for her. The Doctor has no idea what this lady is or how she's doing what she's doing. All our heroes can do is just think on their feet and work out how to survive and stop her from coming out of the picture and killing them. And the lady's inside their heads calling out to them to look at her as she takes her mask off. She's like this siren living inside of the art. I feel there really aren't enough situations in Doctor Who where the Doctor doesn't know what the enemy is and how to defeat them already. The way he talks in most episodes, you'd swear he'd swallowed a copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But the entity here is entirely anonymous, and because of that, she's utterly petrifying. Next up we got the Galileo Trap, where the Doctor takes new companion, archaeologist from the Red Lady, Helen Sinclair, to 16th century Italy with him and Liv, following a message he received from his old friend Galileo, who's been under house arrest for heresy for some time now, where they find a mysterious new plague has been robbing people of their souls, only to find that the entire setup is a trap orchestrated by a pair of deranged aliens with hidden monster faces, and their evil alien dog thing. It's not really that notable. If I were to compare it to anything, it would be any 4th Doctor era story that you thought was pretty decent, and that was about it really. Although it does deal with some interesting ideas, as you've got John Woodvine giving a really dignified performance as Galileo, who's being imprisoned by an alien taking the form of his deceased daughter. Which, you know, is a really nice and horribly grim sci-fi idea. If the episode had taken out some of the stuff about the evil alien dog thing and done a full-on character piece with this idea, because as said, John Woodvine's really giving it his all, this could easily have been a classic. This is not to say it's not good though. While the plot's nothing special, you know, alien on the loose, locals try and explain it away, it gets the job done well enough and makes for a pretty decent way to kill an hour. The Satanic Mill unfortunately finishes up the box set with one of the most frustrating Big Finish releases I've ever heard. So the Doctor, Liv and Helen arrive on a bizarre artificial planet populated by evil robots that control a factory operated by brainwashed human slaves with no mind or will of their own, who are working for bizarre and nebulous purposes, and they're kept in line by the robots' usage of rituals, dogma and hymns that resemble familiar religious iconography. Now, while there are a billion plot holes everywhere, I fucking love this idea to bits, and there are a lot of opportunities to do something a lot deeper than the pulp sci-fi that we're used to seeing from Doctor Who. It's a sci-fi reappropriation of the concept of wage slavery and of worker exploitation, which, given the appalling story about working conditions at Sports Direct which broke recently, considering the current socio-economic and political climate, the Satanic Mill has got some very socially relevant themes. These are workers that are born and raised unaware of values of health and safety in sick bays or basic human rights. And yet, for some reason, the Satanic Mill does fucking nothing with this. It basically just amounts to our characters wandering through some set pieces and describing those set pieces to us, because, you know, audio drama. And then they run into the 11 again, who was behind it all along, for some reason. And exposition dump, Doctor stops him, the end. And the thing is, the frustrating waste of opportunity isn't primarily down to poor writing or story structure. Although, yes, it does suffer from both of those things as well. The structure is incredibly weak. It doesn't bother having that much of a direction to it, and then all of a sudden it's got to do the whole wrapping up the events of the box set shit in the second half. And the writing itself isn't that great either. A lot of the dialogue feels really clunky and just, this is a bit of the central concept that hasn't been brought up yet, so I'm just going to flat out say it now instead of allowing it to arise naturally. However, I do think this is more a case of brilliant idea and a writer who I can tell is capable, but this is totally the wrong place to do it. If this story had been told in a visual medium and had fixed at least 89 of its gaping plot holes, this could have really been something special. So overall, even if it trails off a bit in the second half, I would recommend Doom Coalition 1. While it is basically a continuation of Dark Eyes, at least in terms of style, the context of Dark Eyes isn't totally necessary, and it has a bit more of a hands-off approach to its story arc regarding the 11, which was all that I was really looking for. The story arc is important enough to the direction of the box set, but it doesn't take anything away from the individual stories that it's telling. Aside from the Satanic Mill, which is too fucking tragic to even think about. Anyway, next up we're going to talk about this thing. Now initially, I had pretty much no interest in hearing a River Song spin-off, having been one of the people who got insufferably bored of the story arc that had no idea where it was going in Season 6 of New Who, so the only way that Big Finish were ever going to get me to buy this box set would be if they added an appearance by that Doctor that I said I'd review all of the audios he featured in. God damn it, Big Finish, how do you know how to pull my strings so fucking well? Alright, take my money then, you devious bastards. While not a complete misfire like some Big Finish fans bored with New Who were saying it would be when they first announced it, it does take quite a while to fully get going, and I did find myself zoning out a fair bit in the first half. The opening instalment, The Boundless Sea, is, for want of a better word, kinda crap. But it is crap in an encouraging way. Somehow. If that makes any sense. Which it probably doesn't, and... Okay, hang on a sec. I need to go figure out how that sentence makes any sense. Okay, so if anyone could help me figure out how the fuck I've done this, so that's negative, that's positive. How the fuck can I hold these two opinions? It doesn't make sense. Fuck. My brain's melting. I'm melting! Okay, so after a needlessly overlong establishing bit, setting up that River is basically working as an archaeologist at a museum and she's like a loner and stuff, she journeys to Egypt where a young archaeological assistant has been killed while exploring an ancient Egyptian tomb, and River and a bumbling posh idiot named Bertie explore the tomb and come across the zombie of the girl and the zombie of a dead Egyptian queen who was buried alive with her husband and wants revenge. It's kind of like an old-school farce. It's Abbott and Costello run away from mummies, except with a character from Doctor Who. Pretty much everything that I took away from it was that in spite of some clunky dialogue, and easily the most robotish performance that Alex Kingston has turned in to date, also I really wasn't a fan of just how cold and inhuman River came across in this one. Seriously, I can't be the only one asking this. What happened to the charming River that we first met in Silence in the Library? But I did actually find that I liked the fact that I was listening to a River without the Doctor. Her character is less hampered by the context of her and the Doctor's relationship and having to go, so where are we now? Have you been to insert planet that's going to be in a future episode here yet? Hashtag spoilers, sweetie. River did need some sense of agency and some establishing that she's a character in her own right and not purely defined by her relationship with the Doctor. So as said, while I don't like what the Boundless Sea actually is, I do appreciate what drives it. The next story is called I Went to a Marvellous Party, and for some reason, the second they announced this box set, I predicted there'd be a story with the words Marvellous Party in the title. I can't be the only one who did that there. Anyway, it sees River showing up on board a spaceship where a party's been going on for years, where a man called... Count Travers von Space something has been murdered by an unknown assailant. Oh my god, dun dun dun. And River has to solve the mystery or something. While I enjoyed this one, it's certainly a lot more competent than Boundless Sea was, I found that River herself was the weak link for me. The best way to express my frustration with the Diary of River song is to compare it with the Charlie Pollard spin-off series, which is fucking awesome, which basically does the same thing. Charlie journeys around the universe while travelling with these weird aliens called the Virons, who are searching for weird viruses, except the key difference is that it stars Charlie, who is about 1 billion times more fun to be around than the cold and hard and cynical River song that we see here. Maybe it's because I'm more invested in Charlie's story than River's, but I wasn't exactly enamoured by this River song right out of the gate. It did take till after these first two editions to feel like 1, Alex Kingston was actually comfortable in the audio format, and 2, for the writing to showcase a side of River that wasn't blunt, cold and distant. However, I could start to see glimmers of warmth in some scenes between River and a girl who was brought on board who spends the episode disguised as a robot. This sets up the River that I actually liked in the next story. And this angle of the plot does make for some of the best scenes in the episode, aside from another angle that this one deals with, which is to do with a group calling themselves the Rulers of the Universe, who fuck about with the development and technological and philosophical advancement of young and emergent planets. Yeah, the story's trying to do a bit much, but it does set up the next and best entry in the box set, so I'll overlook it. So yeah, Signs is the third in the box, and I really wasn't expecting it to play out like this for 2 reasons. One was obviously that the box set up until this point had been typical pulp sci-fi, and two was that it had been quite a while since I'd heard Big Finish do something so out there experimental and just downright weird. So River's hunting down these ancient alien spaceships, and the second I said the words ancient alien spaceships, most of you probably thought of this guy, so there. I am not saying it was aliens. But it was aliens. There, obligatory meme out of the way with, moving on. Anyway, she's hunting down these things called spore ships left by an ancient civilization, with a mysterious man that she's made to believe is the Doctor. It's a bit weird and incoherent, and you're never quite sure whether what you're listening to is real and a flashback, or it's a dream hallucination that River's having while being treated for some disease that she's supposed to be dying of, while in the company of said mysterious man on a spaceship somewhere. But the scattered, almost collage-like structure of the story appears to be self-aware, at least to a certain extent, as there are a fair few references to the tropes that we saw throughout the Moffat era, and as we cut around these weird and sinister dreams, River is piecing together fragments of information, and it does end up making sense. I really missed the Big Finish that messes about with story structure. If you liked stuff like Creatures of Beauty, your eyes will go all misty-eyed when you hear this one, and I'd really like to hear them do more stuff like it in the future. We finish up the box set with The Rulers of the Universe, the one that most people probably bought it for, where the 8th Doctor, in the middle of the Time War at this point, shows up on board the party ship where the Rulers of the Universe introduce themselves and say that they want to become key players in the Time War. And then River shows up to uncover the mysteries of and take down the spore ships from last time, which are endangering innocent planets. If you were expecting a full-on 8 and River adventure, you're gonna be a bit disappointed, as for reasons of timey-wimey etc, River can't actually meet 8 yet, so we spend a good chunk of the episode with River on one end of a comlink, guiding the 8th Doctor through the mysterious alien spore ship while pretending to be someone else. While there is some good, if hampered, interplay between Kingston and McGann, hampered because of the whole "you can't know that I'm secretly your future wife" thing, while it's enjoyable, it's a little bit sad that River gets kinda shifted to one side to let the Doctor get the bulk of the doing the actual stuff portions of the episode, while River just sort of stands about feeding him information and technobabble. This may have been done because Big Finish were aware that lots of their hardcore audience would probably complain about River getting her own spin-off, and Paul McGann has quite a lot of good faith among the aforementioned hardcores, and I'm not complaining about it per se. Paul McGann doesn't know how to give a bad performance, but the thing is, I had started to warm to River over bits and pieces of I Went to a Marvellous Party and pretty much all of Signs. So it's a bit weird that the crowd pleaser with the special guest star is stuck here at the end of the box set after River kind of sort of started to win me over. So overall, while it's shown some potential, and I'm definitely considering buying Series 2 when it's out now, I was probably still measuring the setup against Charlie Season 1, and was kinda jealous throughout that this is getting a second series before Charlie Series 2 gets released, because I can be a bitter wanker sometimes. But I will say this for it, it was a lot better than I was expecting.